My name is Daniel Cross. I'm 46 years old, and I have the kind of piercing blue eyes that see through corporate lies and political games, salt and pepper hair that I keep meticulously styled, and the lean, athletic build of a man who runs 5 miles every morning before dawn. My face is angular and sharp, a prominent jawline, high cheekbones, and the kind of intense stare that makes city council members squirm in their seats. I've been told I look like someone who doesn't forgive easily, and they're absolutely right. 18 years. That's how long I spent building Riverside Heights from an abandoned industrial district into the most desirable neighborhood in Denver. While other urban planners pushed paper and attended endless committee meetings, I did something different. I created communities. Real communities where families wanted to live, where local businesses thrived, where property values soared not because of speculation, but because of genuine transformation. Rebecca Morrison sat across from me in that marble-floored conference room at City Hall, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming impatiently on the polished table. She was 34, the new director of urban development, hired 6 months ago after Mayor Patterson's re-election campaign promised innovative approaches to city planning. Her smile was sharp as a blade, and her eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had never built anything in her life, only destroyed what others had created. "Daniel," she said, sliding a termination letter across the table, "the city is restructuring the planning department. We're moving toward a more collaborative, committee-based approach. Your independent methods no longer align with our vision." I looked at the letter, then back at her. 18 years of transforming neglected neighborhoods, of turning empty lots into thriving communities, of proving that urban planning could be about more than zoning variances and development permits. All of it reduced to methods that no longer align. I've increased property tax revenue by 40% in every district I've worked on, I said calmly. Crime rates down, business investment up, community satisfaction at record highs. "And we appreciate that," Rebecca replied, checking her phone. "But the mayor wants a more inclusive approach. Less top-down decision-making, more stakeholder input, more consensus building." Consensus building. I knew what that meant. It meant nothing would ever get built again. It meant endless meetings where nothing got decided, where good projects died in committee, where the only winners were the consultants who got paid to facilitate discussions that led nowhere. "Clean out your office by Friday," she continued. "The severance package is quite generous." I stood up, straightened my tie, and looked her directly in the eyes. "Thank you for the opportunity." 18 years was a good run? Rebecca's smile widened. She thought she was looking at a defeated man, ready to shuffle into retirement with his pension and his memories of better days. What she didn't know was that 3 months ago, when I first heard whispers about the restructuring, I had quietly begun documenting everything. Every development contact I had cultivated, every contractor who trusted my judgment, every investor who had made money following my recommendations. Most importantly, every piece of inside knowledge about upcoming development opportunities that the city planning department had been preparing for. It was all perfectly legal. The relationships were mine, built over nearly 2 decades of delivering results. The knowledge of which neighborhoods were ripe for development, which properties were about to be rezoned, which infrastructure projects would create the next wave of opportunity that lived in my experience, not in the city's filing cabinets. I walked back to my office on the 14th floor of the municipal building, the same office where I had planned the revitalization of 6 different neighborhoods, designed the development strategies that had attracted over $200 million in private investment, and created the frameworks that turned Denver into one of America's fastest-growing cities. 18 years of commendations went into a cardboard box. The photo of my late father at the groundbreaking for Riverside Commons went carefully into my briefcase. He had been a construction foreman who taught me that buildings weren't just structures, they were dreams made manifest, communities given form. My contact database stayed exactly where it was. Let them figure out why those phone numbers stopped working. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael Torres at Torres Construction, one of the largest residential developers in Colorado. "Heard rumors about changes at city planning. You okay?" I typed back. All good. Actually, I might have some interesting opportunities to discuss soon. Rebecca walked past my office, probably making sure I wasn't copying sensitive files. She had no idea that the most sensitive information, the knowledge of how to turn vision into reality, was walking out the door with me. I had started in city planning right after my father died in a construction accident. A crane collapse at a poorly planned site. The kind of tragedy that happens when bureaucrats make decisions about things they don't understand. I swore I would do better, that I would bridge the gap between the people who plan and the people who build. My first major success came in 2008 during the financial crisis. The Northside District was a collection of abandoned warehouses and empty lots that the previous planning director had written off as economically unviable. While other cities were cutting budgets and shelving development projects, I saw opportunity. I spent months walking those streets, talking to the handful of business owners who had stayed, understanding what the community needed. Then I crafted a development plan that wasn't just about bringing in big developers. It was about supporting the existing community while attracting new investment. The key was the relationships. I didn't just send out RFPs and wait for responses. I personally met with contractors, developers, and investors. I learned their businesses, understood their constraints, and most importantly, I delivered on my promises. When I said a permit would be approved in 30 days, it was approved in 30 days. When I said the infrastructure would be ready by a certain date, it was ready. Over the years, those relationships became my most valuable asset. Christmas cards to developers' families, remembering contractors' kids' names, attending industry events not to network but to maintain genuine friendships with people who shared my vision of building better communities. When COVID hit and construction projects across the country were stalling, those relationships saved Denver's development momentum. While other cities saw investment dry up, I had developers who trusted me enough to move forward with projects because they knew I would navigate the regulatory challenges. Rebecca Morrison arrived 6 months ago with a master's degree in public administration from Georgetown and ideas about democratizing urban development. She looked at my developer relationships and saw corruption, too much personal contact, too many direct conversations, too much trust, not enough public hearings and committee oversight. We need transparency, she told me during our first meeting. Open bidding processes, public stakeholder meetings, community input sessions. The days of backroom deals are over. I nodded and kept working, but I started noticing changes. Development applications I had been shepherding were suddenly requiring additional review. Meetings with contractors were being scheduled through official channels only. Projects I had been nurturing for months were being reassigned to junior planners who had never spoken to the developers. Last month, I overheard Rebecca on a call with the mayor. Daniel's approach is outdated. He's too cozy with the development community. We need to establish clear boundaries, create more oversight, make the process truly transparent. That's when I knew my time was up. Not because I was failing, but because I was succeeding in ways that political science textbooks couldn't quantify. I made some quiet phone calls, updated some documentation, made sure certain opportunities were properly researched under the right corporate structure. Rebecca thought she was eliminating conflicts of interest. She had no idea she was about to learn the difference between managing urban development and actually understanding how cities grow. Friday afternoon, I loaded the last box into my car and walked out of the municipal building for the final time. The security guard, Carlos, shook my hand at the entrance. "Heard about the changes, Mr. Cross," he said quietly. "Sorry to see you go." "Thanks, Carlos. Take care of yourself." I drove home to my house in Cherry Creek and sat in my study with a cup of coffee. 18 years of work reduced to 3 cardboard boxes in my garage. My father's photo smiled at me from the bookshelf. He would have found this situation grimly ironic. 40 years of building things, he used to say. And you learn that the people who don't build anything are always the ones making the decisions. But this time, I had made some decisions of my own. My phone rang. Michael Torres from Torres Construction. "Daniel, heard through the industry grapevine that you might be making some changes. Wanted to touch base." Actually, Michael, I'm thinking about going into private consulting, development advisory, maybe some investment opportunities. Question for you. If I started my own firm, would Torres be interested in exclusive consulting agreements? Someone who could help navigate the regulatory landscape, identify opportunities before they become public knowledge? Michael was quiet for a moment. Daniel, you know damn well that 70% of our successful projects came from opportunities you identified. If you're asking whether we'd rather work with you directly or try to figure out the city bureaucracy on our own, that's not even a question. I made 12 more calls that evening. Same conversation, same response. By Saturday morning, I had commitments from every major developer and contractor I had worked with over the past decade. Not just to hire my consulting services, to stop working directly with the city planning department until they could prove they understood the industry. The beautiful thing about development relationships is that they're built on results, not contracts. Developers work with people who can deliver permits, navigate regulations, and identify profitable opportunities. City planners who can't do those things quickly become irrelevant. What Rebecca didn't understand was that those developers had been working with me, not with the city of Denver. When I left, the expertise left with me. I spent the weekend setting up cross-development strategies. Business license, insurance, office space, and a building I had helped plan 5 years earlier. By Sunday evening, I had a functioning consulting firm and a client list that included half of Denver's major development companies. Monday morning, I started making calls to my old contacts in the development community. Not to poach city business, that would have been unethical, but to offer my services as a private consultant who could help them navigate the increasingly complex regulatory environment. The response was immediate. Torres Construction hired me to consult on a $50 million mixed-use project in the Highland District. Apex Development brought me in to advise on a residential complex in Baker. Mountain View Investments wanted my assessment of opportunities in the River North Art District. By Tuesday, I had consulting contracts worth more than my annual city salary. By Wednesday, Rebecca was about to discover that eliminating the guy who understood your industry was like removing the foundation from a building. Everything else starts to crack. Tuesday morning, Rebecca Morrison walked into her new office expecting a productive day of implementing transparent development processes. Instead, she found her assistant holding a stack of phone messages and looking confused. "These came in yesterday afternoon," the assistant said. "Development companies asking about project status, permit timelines, regulatory changes. I don't understand most of the questions." Rebecca looked through the messages. Torres Construction wanted to know about the Highland District rezoning timeline. Apex Development was asking about infrastructure assessments for the Baker area. Mountain View Investments needed clarification on the River North Development guidelines. These were all projects that Daniel had been managing. Major developments worth hundreds of millions in private investment and millions in tax revenue for the city. She called Torres Construction first. "Michael Torres, please." "This is Rebecca Morrison, Director of Urban Development." "Michael's in a meeting," the receptionist said. "Can I take a message?" "This is about the Highland District project. I need to discuss the development timeline. I'll have someone get back to you." But no one called back. She tried Apex Development, Mountain View Investments, and 3 other major development companies. Same response, polite brush-offs, vague promises to return calls that never came. By noon, she was starting to panic. She pulled up the project files on her computer, looking for contact information, technical specifications, regulatory requirements, anything that would help her understand what Daniel had been working on. What she found made her realize the scope of the disaster. Every major development project in the city had Daniel's name on the contact list. Every regulatory assessment, every infrastructure study, every zoning analysis bore his signature. But more importantly, every file contained references to conversations, agreements, and understandings that existed nowhere in the official documentation. Her phone rang. Mayor Patterson. "Rebecca, I'm getting calls from 3 city council members. They're asking about delays in development projects." "What's going on?" "We're having some transition issues with the planning department restructuring. I'm working to resolve them. Resolve them how? Councilman Martinez says the Highland District project has stalled completely. That's a $12 million tax revenue projection for this fiscal year. Rebecca felt sweat on her forehead. I'll get back to him with an update. You better. If we lose major developments because of bureaucratic fumbling, there will be consequences. After the mayor hung up, Rebecca sat in her office trying to understand what was happening. Daniel Cross had been terminated on Monday. By Tuesday, the city's entire development pipeline was grinding to a halt. She tried a different approach. Called the junior planners who had worked with Daniel, hoping they could provide insight into the stalled projects. I don't really know the details, the first one said. Daniel handled all the developer relationships directly. He said it was important to maintain consistency. The second planner was more helpful. Daniel had his own system for tracking projects. He kept most of the important information in his head: relationships, timelines, regulatory strategies. We just handled the paperwork. By Wednesday morning, Rebecca was desperate. She swallowed her pride and tried to call Daniel directly, hoping to arrange some kind of consulting agreement to smooth the transition. The number was disconnected. She tried reaching out through mutual contacts, but everyone she spoke to gave her the same message. Daniel was now working as a private consultant, and his schedule was completely booked with existing clients. Wednesday afternoon, Rebecca decided to visit some of the development companies in person. If they wouldn't take her calls, maybe face-to-face meetings would work? Her first stop was Torres Construction, a gleaming office building in the Denver Tech Center. She walked into the lobby wearing her best suit and carrying a briefcase full of project updates she had hastily prepared. I'm here to see Michael Torres, she told the receptionist. Rebecca Morrison, Director of Urban Development for the City of Denver. The receptionist made a phone call, spoke quietly for a moment, then hung up. Mr. Torres isn't available. I drove here specifically to discuss the Highland District project. This is important for the city. I understand, but he's not available. Rebecca waited in the lobby for 45 minutes, watching employees walk past, seeing blueprints and development plans that represented millions of dollars in investment that the city desperately needed. Finally, a man in his 50s walked out, expensive suit, confident bearing, the unmistakable presence of someone who had built a successful business from nothing. You Rebecca Morrison? Yes. Are you Michael Torres? I am. You wanted to discuss the Highland project? Yes, I understand there may be some confusion about the development timeline. I'm here to clarify the city's position and get things moving forward. Michael looked at her with polite but distant professionalism. Miss Morrison, there's no confusion. We've suspended all new projects with the City of Denver pending a review of the current regulatory environment. What does that mean? It means we're not confident in the city's ability to deliver consistent, reliable development oversight. The Highland project requires complex coordination between multiple city departments, precise regulatory timing, and deep understanding of both the community needs and the construction realities. We don't believe the current planning department has that capability. Rebecca felt a chill. We can provide whatever support you need. Additional staff, expedited reviews, direct access to department heads. It's not about support, Michael interrupted. It's about expertise. Daniel Cross understood our business. He knew how to balance community concerns with economic realities, how to navigate regulatory challenges, how to make projects successful for everyone involved. Without that expertise, these projects become too risky. Where is Daniel now? Michael smiled for the first time during their conversation, running his own consulting firm, cross-development strategies, and doing very well from what I hear. Rebecca drove back to City Hall in stunned silence. She had thought Daniel was just another city employee, a planner who processed applications and attended meetings. What she had actually eliminated was the human bridge between the city and the development community that drove its economic growth. By Thursday morning, she had a clearer picture of the catastrophe. Every major development company in Denver had either suspended projects or shifted their focus to suburban municipalities with more predictable planning processes. The city stood to lose over $300 million in projected development investment and nearly $25 million in annual tax revenue. The mayor called an emergency meeting for Friday. Rebecca spent Thursday night updating her resume. Friday morning, Rebecca sat in the mayor's conference room with Mayor Patterson and 4 city council members. The mood was grim. "Explain to me how we went from record development growth to a complete investment freeze in 1 week," Mayor Patterson said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Rebecca had prepared for this moment. She opened her folder and laid out project status reports. "It appears that our former planning director, Daniel Cross, had structured our development relationships in a way that made them dependent on his personal involvement. When we restructured the department, several major developers chose to suspend their projects." Suspend their projects? "They've indicated concerns about the city's current planning capabilities. Some have hired Daniel as a private consultant." Mayor Patterson studied the reports. "These are all major tax revenue generators. The Highland District project alone represents $12 million in annual property taxes." "Yes. And you fired the guy who was managing all of these projects." Rebecca felt the room getting smaller. "We were implementing more transparent, committee-based processes." His approach was considered too individualistic. Too individualistic? Councilman Martinez leaned forward. "Daniel Cross brought more development investment to this city than any planning director in our history. My district alone saw 40% property value increases under his oversight." Before Rebecca could respond, her assistant knocked on the conference room door. "Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Mayor. You have a call from the Denver Business Journal. They want to comment on reports about the development project suspensions." Mayor Patterson took the call in the conference room. Rebecca and the council members listened to one side of the conversation. "I understand. No, we're not aware of any systematic issues with development oversight. Yes, we're investigating the project delays. No comment on personnel changes at this time." When he hung up, Mayor Patterson's expression was dangerous. "The business community is asking questions about our economic development strategy. The Chamber of Commerce wants a meeting. The Denver Post is preparing a story about the planning department changes and their impact on city growth." The silence in the room was heavy. "There's more," Rebecca's assistant said from the doorway. "Daniel Cross called. He's offering to meet with you." Mayor Patterson looked up sharply. "He wants to meet? This afternoon, if possible. He said he has a proposal that might help address the development situation." Rebecca felt relief and dread in equal measure. Relief that maybe they could salvage some of the suspended projects. Dread that Daniel was now in a position to dictate terms. "Set up the meeting," Mayor Patterson said. 2 o'clock. After the others left, Rebecca sat alone in the conference room. Her restructuring initiative had turned into an economic development crisis in less than a week. The man she had fired with such confidence was now the only person who could restore the city's growth momentum. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Rebecca, this is Daniel. Looking forward to our meeting this afternoon. I have some ideas about how the city might rebuild its relationship with the development community. We should discuss partnership opportunities." Rebecca stared at the message. Daniel wasn't offering to come back as an employee. He was offering to become a consultant, the city's most expensive consultant. At exactly 2 p.m., Daniel Cross walked into the mayor's conference room wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit and carrying a leather portfolio. He looked calm, professional, and completely in control, the same conference room where Rebecca had terminated his employment exactly 1 week earlier. "Daniel," Mayor Patterson said, "thank you for coming. We understand there may be some opportunities for collaboration on the development issues we've been experiencing." Daniel opened his portfolio and pulled out a presentation folder. "I've been working with several development companies this week, and I believe there's a path forward that could benefit everyone." Rebecca held her breath. "Cross Development Strategies is prepared to serve as a liaison between the city and the development community," Daniel continued. "We would handle project coordination, regulatory consultation, and stakeholder management for major developments. This would allow the city planning department to focus on policy and oversight while ensuring projects move forward efficiently." Mayor Patterson leaned forward. "What kind of arrangement are we discussing?" Daniel slid a proposal across the table. a consulting contract for development coordination services. Standard rate for specialized municipal consulting is $300 per hour. Given the scope of services and the urgent nature of restoring development momentum, our rate would be $400 per hour. Rebecca's heart sank. At $400 per hour for the kind of comprehensive project management Daniel provided, the city would be paying more for his consulting services than they had for his entire annual salary. That seems expensive, she said. Daniel looked at her with the same measured calm he had shown when she fired him. Rebecca, a week ago I was a cost center to be eliminated. Today I'm the solution to a crisis that threatens millions in city revenue. Value is determined by results. Mayor Patterson studied the proposal. How quickly could you restore the suspended projects? I've already begun preliminary discussions with Torres Construction, Apex Development, and Mountain View Investments. With a signed agreement, I could have development projects moving forward within 2 weeks. Mayor Patterson signed the contract without hesitation. Daniel shook hands with everyone in the room. When he reached Rebecca, he held her gaze for a moment. "Thank you for the opportunity," he said. "Sometimes career changes lead to better outcomes for everyone involved." 6 months later, Cross Development Strategies had grown from a one-man consulting firm to a regional municipal advisory company with clients in 4 states. The relationships Daniel had built over 18 years became the foundation for helping cities across the Mountain West navigate complex development challenges. Rebecca Morrison lasted another 6 weeks at the city of Denver before accepting a position with a nonprofit in Portland. The development crisis had been resolved, but her reputation as a public administrator was irreparably damaged. Daniel kept his new business focused and personal. No large offices, no layers of bureaucracy, just experienced professionals helping cities and developers create successful communities. He hired 4 consultants, all of them former city planners who understood that urban development wasn't about process management, but about building places where people wanted to live. On a Thursday evening in March, Daniel sat in his home office reviewing the week's project reports. 6 major developments moving forward on schedule, 4 new consulting contracts signed, 3 cities requesting proposals for comprehensive planning services. His phone rang. Michael Torres. "Daniel, got a minute? We're looking at opportunities in Colorado Springs. Interested in expanding the partnership?" "Always interested in good projects, Michael. Send me the details." After he hung up, Daniel looked at his father's photo on the bookshelf. The old man would have been proud. Not because his son had gotten revenge on the people who fired him, but because he had built something meaningful from what they threw away. Sometimes the best response to being undervalued is proving your worth on terms you set yourself.